This is Nikki Candian coming to you from www.westcoasttruth.com, and you're listening to The West Coast Truth with your host, Russell Scott.
Out of respect for tonight's guest, Jacque Fresco, all commercials have been removed from the final broadcast.
On
tonight's program, industrial designer, social engineer, and founder of the Venus Project, Jacque Fresco.
Jacque Fresco, welcome to the West Coast Truth.
Oh, that's a privilege.
What is the Venus Project?
Yes, the Venus Project, or resource-based economy, is a redesign of our culture so that we no longer have the need for war, poverty, hunger, unemployment, and all of the problems that humanity has had ever since they've begun to colonize. It's a new attempt, a new value system. It's almost a cerebral enema.
Well, explain it in a little further detail. I mean, something like this is very daunting to people, to the average person.
If you want a world without war, without most of the problems you have today, you have to do certain things. And this is what I feel we have to do. We have to bring all the nations together rather than use soldiers as killing machines or use force to force our values on other people. I'm against that. I'm against any kind of force. I'm against the military, the police, all force organizations. I feel if the public has access to the necessities of life, they will not steal or misbehave. I believe that environment shapes behavior. So you understand me completely. The Venus Project calls for a resource-based economy in which all the nations of the world have access to the necessities of life. I feel a few nations control most of the Earth's resources. You're going to have territorial disputes. You're going to have wars. You're going to have all the problems you've always had. Even though you sign peace treaties and agreements with other nations, if those agreements do not serve our interests, we will violate them. And that goes for all nations. Now, when you think about it, if you really do think about it at all, where did we get this land? We took it by force and violence from the Indians. They didn't say, come here, build whatever you want to build. We stole the land. That goes for England, Germany, France. They say the sun never sets on England. Where do you think they got all that territory? They took it. And so I'm saying that all nations today really don't know how to solve problems. They really make laws. And most of the man-made laws have nothing to do with natural law. And so they don't work. In other words, American prisons are loaded with what they call criminals. This is a criminal system like all other systems. What you have to do is share the earth with everybody and share knowledge with everyone. If you own patents, you deprive people of certain advantages. If you own territory or if you own major resources of the world, you're going to have problems. What you need is all resources to become the common heritage of all the world's people. Now, you may not like what I say, but I'm saying if you want a world without war, without hostility, without poverty, without most crimes, you have to re-engineer the society. Re-engineer the society means overcome problems such as scarcity, I don't know if you know this, but engineers today deliberately design things to wear out, break down.
Planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence, yes. And farmers are paid sometimes not to grow food. Well, what good is technology if you design products to go just a little beyond the warranty? Do you know the old Edison lamp lasted 100 years? Now, you don't have that with electric lights today, bulbs. They burn out. They're designed to burn out. Look at your cell phones. They're junk. They go very shortly, and you have to buy new ones. In the old days, there was one object in your home that never broke down, never wore out. And it didn't even belong to you. It was a telephone given to us by the telephone company. They didn't want it to wear out and break down. You can drop it on the floor. You can bang it against things. It was very solidly built. The telephones today are junk. They're just little tiny circuits which can go any time. And I don't appreciate scientists today when they become specialists. Scientists ought not to make weapons of war. If scientists really existed, they'd ask questions outside of their discipline. Unfortunately, today we have chemists, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and they rarely can venture outside of their profession. A scientist would never work on weapons of war. They'd ask, what makes war? Why are nations so full of hatred that they would fly airplanes into our twin towers? What did we do to make so much hatred in people? I don't believe I've ever heard anything on the air as to why they did that, and I don't think any other American has that I've asked. I've asked, do you know why they've flown those planes into the buildings? No. Do you know why Hitler was so popular in Germany? No. Do you know why some people are called lazy and some people are called creative? Because we don't know enough about human behavior to generate a relatively good relationship with all nations.
Hitler was popular, I believe, because they were forced to increase production in that country in order to pay back Britain the money that they owed Britain for the war, World War I. And this, of course, brought up the industrial complex in Germany, and that made Hitler very popular as a nationalist. And this sort of speaks to the root of the problem, I believe.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you the question, is money the root of all evil?
The love of money is the root of all evil. But it isn't just money alone. It's the way we think about things. It's the indoctrination we receive from our society. My grandfather started me off correctly by telling me that all nations are basically make contributions to one another. They said people came from all over the world and they brought the printing press, language, religion, our social customs, our values, and so we owe so much. Like Louis Pasteur was a Frenchman, and so maybe because of Louis Pasteur, most of us are alive today. So I would not pledge allegiance to any one country. I would pledge allegiance to the earth and everyone on it, so that all the resources of the world are taken care of. If we keep dumping toxic materials and spent nuclear fuel into the rivers and oceans of the world, we're going to pay for it and pay dearly for it. We can no longer afford to have separate nations, especially in the nuclear age. Sooner or later, some jackasses have to release one of the nuclear weapons, and I think if we contaminate the earth, it'll be radioactive for thousands of years. There's no road to yesterday. You can't go backward. And we don't have very much time left. The only solution that I can understand is to make all the Earth's resources available to all the world's people and use science and technology only to enhance the lives of all the world's people. Anything less than that will revert back to the same problems.
Jacque, Muammar Gaddafi wanted to create a gold standard currency for all of Africa, not just Libya. And that was the real reason the world government went in there and killed him and his family and replaced it with a puppet regime. Jacque,
not only that, but George Washington had 300 slaves. Today he'd be run out of town. Harry Truman was a hat salesman. I don't know what he was doing in government. Politicians are totally unaware of the nature of human behavior, the factors that shape human behavior. They're completely not aware of it. That's why they make laws. And the kind of people that run your government are totally incompetent. They've never made one increase in growing agriculture, more food than necessary. They never improved electrical transmission lines. They've never added anything to the world. I don't know how it is that they are appointed to positions of leadership except by keeping the public poorly informed.
Yeah, and Truman was bribed for only $2 million to enter into World War II. Now, my question was that if Gaddafi was not capable of being successful, and what he wanted to do was a truly humanitarian thing. He wanted the best for Libyans and for all of Africa. How could anyone be...
I think I know what you want to know. I believe, how can you deal with the world today? There's so many different concepts of God, so many different social customs, and so many different positions of advantage that people have. How do you get to normal people? How do you change them? Is that your question?
No, how do you get by the powers that be? The rich bankers and the military-industrial complex?
Here's how you do it.
Okay.
No nation ever looked ahead and said, we're moving in this direction, these are the changes that come. People are elected to political office not to change things, but to keep things as they are. And they indoctrinate people to uphold whatever social system you're brought up under. So here's how you change it. Years ago, I said to myself, Jacque, how are you going to change the world with all the different values and the advantage groups already in power? So I joined the Ku Klux Klan in Miami, and it took me a month and a half to dissolve it. Then I joined the White Citizens Council. They hate foreigners, all foreigners. I joined that organization and dissolved it in 1 month alone. I've been working on how to change people to accept newer values, different values than the ones they were brought up to accept. And we have people that come out here from all over the world, and they come here a certain way. When they leave, they're all very different. It's about 95% successful. I wouldn't say 100% successful, because I don't know. But when people leave here, they constantly thank me for giving them a way of looking at life that makes sense.
But there's only one Jacque Fresco.
Yes, but there's a lot of people that have been influenced, and they know what to do. Roxanne, for example, knows a lot about what to do. Joel knows a lot about how to change things. What the Venus Project main concern is what to do about problems. If you just criticize your government or criticize transportation, that does nothing. We call that a nothing thing. Protesting in front of a building does nothing to change things. The way you change things is by educating people. Now, you got to understand, when the electric light was invented, Edison had to explain just what it was, how it worked. Otherwise, people would never know about it. When you always come up with a new idea, you have to explain to people what it is and how it works. From the theory of evolution to the biblical teachings, they had to explain it to other people. It took years for Christians to evolve into the Christian viewpoint. It took years for Muslims, Mohammedans to evolve. You have to talk to people. You have to change their way of thinking, but you cannot do it by attacking. The way I changed the Klan was very different. I worked with the leader of the Klan, And the leader of the Klan said to me, "Jacque, you're a smart guy. What do you think of the Ku Klux Klan?" That's exactly the way he put it. I said to him, "It's a great organization, but it doesn't go far enough. That gets his ear. If you attack, you lose it." Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to have a strategy of approach, and it's nothing to do with reason. People are not reasonable. If you use reason and logic, it doesn't work. People are not reasonable nor logical. There wouldn't be wars if people were reasonable or logical. We are not civilized yet.
Well, it sounds to me like we need to implement some level of subterfuge.
Well, Roxanne and I just recently came back from a global tour, and we had as many as 300 people in an auditorium. I didn't know those people at all, and most of them were very satisfied. Like I said, 95% of the lectures presented in all the different countries were widely accepted. Now we're known throughout the world. There are millions of people all over the world that have meetings every week, and they know a lot about the Venus Project, which they didn't know in the past. It's not an organization of engineers that are going to tell people what to do. There's no technical elitism. It is not against anybody. It doesn't want to kill anybody. It believes that all people are victims of culture, meaning if you were raised as a baby by the headhunters of the Amazon, if you never saw anything, never traveled anywhere, you would be a headhunter. And if I disliked you, that would be stupid of me, because that's where you come from. If you took your grandmother to Miami Beach, and she saw the girls with their butts hanging out, she might say they've gone too far. Where she's coming from, that makes sense, but it isn't accurate. When I met Einstein as a kid, I asked him, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "Which one?" I said, "Do you believe in truth?" He said, "What do you mean by truth?" "That certain things are so." He said, "Like what?" He pinned me down. I said, "Well, I had a mental surface with me," and I said, "Well, this surface is smooth. That's the truth." He said, "No, it's not the truth. That's according to your receptors, it's smooth. But if you put that same surface under a microscope, it looks very textured." So I said, "Is that what it's really like?" He said, "No." He blew it up more, and it looked like particles that weren't even touching each other. He said, "It depends on our receptors. We cannot see things as they really are. We can only see them in relation to our receptors. So when the microscope was invented, it extended human receptivity to a world that we didn't even know existed. When the telescope was developed, we could see the craters of the moon. Before that, we could only speculate. We need far less speculation and a great deal of information. And the information has to be imparted to people in the doses that they can accept, and it must be translated in a language that they can also understand and accept. That depends on the skill of the informer.
Well,
Yes.
Jacque, Thomas Gray said, "Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise." Ignorance is bliss. If ignorance is bliss, is knowledge a form of misery?
Ignorance is, and man is insufficient, actually. He's a kind of a cerebral insufficient. Ignorance is not bliss. It'll spell the end of humanity if we don't take on these challenges, not based on opinions, but based upon what people really know. For example, a lot of people ask me this question: who will make the decisions in the Venus Project? The answer is no one. We don't make decisions, we arrive at them. The difference is when you take steel and alloy it differently with different ingredients, cobalt, tungsten, and then you twist it and pull it and compress it, and you make a chart on the characteristics of that steel. You know, when engineers talk to each other, it's not subject to interpretation. Mathematics is not subject to interpretation. When you read the Bible, person says, this is what Jesus meant. Another person says, no, you're wrong. He meant that. The third person says, you're both wrong. That's why you have the Lutheran, the Seventh-day Adventist, the Catholic, because all language has been designed hundreds of years ago, and it's subject to interpretation. That permits lawyers to exist. They can twist language and do whatever they want with it. But you can't do that with mathematics. You can't do that with chemistry. You can't do that with structural engineering. When engineers design a bridge and they show the blueprint to others, they don't say, I think the beams are 1 foot long and 1 foot tall. And another one says, no, they're only 6 inches tall. You don't have any discrepancies in the language of science. You only have discrepancies when people project their own values into things.
We'll be back in 2 minutes with Jacque Fresco. Jacque, tell us more about some of the futuristic visions that you have.
Well, if you design cities like New York City, every building a different size, to me it looks like chaos. But if you're born in New York, it's a normal environment for you. If you lived in ancient Rome, they believed in many different gods. And then the Christian came to town and said there's only one God. They said, listen to that jerk. And so they decided to feed Christians the lions because they had the wrong idea. But they starved the lions for a week. The whole family used to come to see Christians being fed to lions. And the kids would say, Daddy, can I come next week to see Christians fed to lions? And Daddy might say, if you behave yourself. Is Daddy stupid? No. He's brought up in that culture. We have men punching each other in the head, called boxing, which is very detrimental, yet it's normal to this culture. We have some guy running with a ball, same game, over and over again. No growth, no change.
Nope.
But it's the same culture, because the culture itself is warped. And I'm just posing this. If you want a world without war, this is what you have to do. If you don't do that, it'll revert back to all the conditions. So when you come out here, I will demonstrate and show you feasible demonstrations of how the new system will work and prove to you that it can work. If you want a world without war, if you don't do that, they're inefficient, hard to operate. The city, each person gets off at a different time. They get off, in New York, they get off at 4 o'clock, some get off at 5 o'clock, and your freeways are jammed. During the day, they're not jammed at all. It's very easy to solve that problem. All you do is stagger the calendar. So 1/7 of the population is off every day of the week. Your beaches are never crowded. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You don't have to get on a freeway where the cars can't move anymore. That's because everybody gets off at the same time.
But people will say this is culture.
Oh, they don't know what culture is. That's indoctrination, not culture. They don't even know what culture means. There's no civilization on earth that I look up to today. In other words, I ask a lot of questions. I ask, what would people be like if they weren't educated? I said, gee, I don't know. So I talk to engineers, and they're very good in their field. When they step outside of the field, they're just like anybody else. They're normal. Normal means loused up by society, as I use the words. When I got to the South Sea Islands, I did find an island where people did not receive indoctrination except by the natives of the island. But they wore no clothing at all. The men and women wore no clothing on the island of Tuamotu about 65 years ago. And I noticed something very unusual, that when men spoke to women, they looked at their eyes, not their bodies, because they were brought up without the cover-up. They used to swim nude ever since they were babies. So there was no fetishes on the island. There was no peeping toms. Do you understand that?
Are you saying that we should all be nude?
When we're very young, if we swim nude, you'll do away with girly magazines, you'll do away with peeping toms, you'll do away with fetishes.
This is an interesting point you're raising because...
It is.
Because, you know, the Venus Project claims that it will eliminate crime. And one of the crimes I felt that could not be eliminated were crimes of passion.
No, they could be. Everybody, every word you use, if you're brought up in the South, this is not me speaking now, but I'm telling you, if you were brought up in the South, an uneducated region, you might say, Mo, give me a nigger, not gonna kick his ass. Is that you speaking or what you pick up from your environment? Think about it. Every word you use, every facial expression. If you were brought up in France, you'd say, La Tour Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower. You'll speak with a French accent. If you're brought up in the South, you speak with a Southern accent. If you're brought up in England, you speak with an English accent. And your values are those of an Englishman, depending on what social status you come from. There is no such thing as, I know this is very hard to get very right away, but we cannot make a decision without it being impressed upon us by our culture.
No, we can't. And people will say, "C'est la vie." Such is life. You bring up France.
You don't know the answer. I used to ask people years ago, do you think we'll ever get to the moon? No, not in 1,000 years. I said, have you studied rockets and space travel? I said, no. How do you arrive at that? When the government asked scientists, can you put a man on the moon? The first thing they said is, we don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, we don't know what a man can stand. So they put a man in a centrifuge and whirl it around to see when he conks out. Then they know you can't take off at 1,000 miles an hour. Everybody would die. You can't eat food from a plate. The food would come floating up in a spaceship. So you have to put fluid in a squeeze bottle where you squeeze it into your mouth. If you gave a man a glass of water, the water would come out of the glass and little bubbles would go all over the place. That's what they mean when they say, we don't know. They don't have enough information to make a decision. So what we have to do is a global survey of the Earth's resources and the Earth's carrying capacity. If the Earth can carry 7 billion people, if you make it 8 billion, you're going to have malnutrition and territorial disputes. All behavior is governed by the resources we have. If you have a scarcity of resources, behavior will be modified. If it rained gold for 3 days, people would go outside and bring all the gold in and fill every drawer and every nook and cranny with gold. But if it rained gold for a year, they'd sweep it out of the house.
Scarcity.
Our behavior is not invented by man. Human behavior depends on the abundance or scarcity of a given culture.
Well, if Russia unloaded all their diamonds, they would devalue the diamond market overnight.
Yes. And if they didn't burn the diamonds in Kimberley and maintain a scarcity, they couldn't get the price.
What would you say to those people that would have concerns about a totalitarian regime? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
All powers, all nations are corrupt. All nations indoctrinate their people to respect that particular culture. They do not. In other words, if our president got up and criticized another culture, I would invite the prime minister of that culture to give his point of view. We never had a democracy. The democracy is purely BS, bad science. In other words, people are taught that they live in a democracy. So I get them together and I say, did you vote for the Vietnam War? They say, no. Did you vote for the space program? No. What do you vote for? Did you vote for the design of the Capitol building? No. Where do you participate? They think they participate. The people that are selected to run for political office are not selected on the basis of changing things. They're elected to keep things as they are. That goes for all countries.
But what insulates socio-cyberneering from the ability to be corrupted?
We do away with money. There is no money in the Venus Project. Everyone has access to the necessities of life. From birth to death, they're all given medical care. But everybody is well taken care of. If you share ideas with people, the growth, the international growth, will be enormous. In other words, if you keep patents to yourself, and you keep ideas to yourself, and all corporate, in other words, if you manufactured vacuum cleaners 10 times faster than my company did, you being a nice guy, you say, Jacque, let me show you how you can improve your production. You will lose the competitive edge. Do you understand that? Being kind, being decent, or being even a Christian. Man cannot be a Christian in this society. It's so vile. In other words, we're there to make a buck, and the bottom line is profit, not people. Otherwise, they wouldn't export work to foreign countries. We don't go to other countries with armies to bring democracy. We go because they have oil or something else we need. Isn't that obvious?
I guess what I'm asking is that it sounds in many ways like this is the nanny state taken to its ultimate extreme. Okay. We will provide you everything that you could ever need. All necessities of life are provided to you.
Sounds like utopia.
Right, but that means there must be a provider. You know, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So how is it that the provider, or those that are giving this...
I'll tell you where I get these ideas from. Suppose the human body, suppose the brain said, I do all the thinking. I want all the nutrients, or most of the nutrients. Then the lungs would say, if I don't oxygenate the blood, you would die as a brain. So the brain says to the lungs, what do you need? Everything you need. Every mineral, every vitamin you get. And then the liver would say, if I don't filter the blood, you as a brain and you as a lung would die. So all the organs of the body get whatever the hell it needs. If you have research labs that can't do research because they don't get appropriations, they can only do as much research on cancer as the money you put up. But we have the environment. With all the resources in the world, we can give every lab whatever the hell they need to do research in if you get rid of the money system, which money doesn't represent a damn thing except control over people. And that's all that they're striving for, is to control human life, to keep those in power in power. I'm sorry about what I'm saying. I wish it were otherwise, but it is not.
I 100% agree with you. I believe that the government's modus operandi is merely the self-sustenance of its own operations. It's, you know.
Well, I'm certainly glad I don't have to argue with you.
No, we need a holistic approach.
Yes, we do. So what has to happen is I write books, produce videotapes, and the book is called The Best That Money Can't Buy. It's a society without money. And the only way you'll know about the Venus Project is to read about it. Darwin had to write his theory of evolution. The Big Bang scientists came up with an idea of what they think caused the beginning of our celestial world. And so they had to educate other people or tell them about it. Darwin came up with a theory of evolution, but he had to educate people as to what that theory meant, because it was subject to interpretation. Everything you study today is subject to interpretation except the language of physics, mathematics, chemistry. When a chemist writes a formula and sends it to another country, they don't say, I think he means this. They know exactly what it means. And so when you send an airplane blueprint to Japan, they know the ingredients in the aluminum or the aluminum alloys or the landing gear struts. They know the compression loads, tension loads, torsional loads. They have a language that is uniformly understood. And you cannot build a civilization when language is subject to interpretation.
Are you suggesting that we should get rid of the current language?
Yes.
And replace it with some sort of a mathematical language?
A mathematics that's not subject to interpretation? Yes. I wish it weren't that complex, but you asked me, how do you make a world without war, without hostility, without the threat of nuclear war? You can't do it with the values that exist today. If a single nation gets out into space, I can assure you, sooner or later, there'll be nuclear weapons out there. I can only tell you this, only when the world learns to live together in peace and share ideas, we can go out into space as a joint venture. I'm all for it, but not single nations going out there. Can you understand that? These are my concerns.
Jacque, 37 years ago, you had a conversation with Larry King on Channel 4 in Miami.
Yes.
And you said, I'm paraphrasing slightly, you said there are no television sets, radio, tape recorders, or record players. All of that is done by the central computer system in which all of the world's music and programming is housed in a central computer.
Yes.
This sounds an awful lot like the Internet, which nobody 37 years ago knew anything about.
I know, but I also talked of nanotechnology, but I didn't use those words. I used electroforming of objects. With nanotechnology, we can overcome scarcity, all scarcity. It's very easy to overcome scarcity. It's very easy to solve most problems. Only I can't do it in a 1-hour lecture. I can't turn people around in 1 hour. I'm not able to do that. But I can turn them around when they come from all over the world. They come to this place in Venus, and I tell them, when you're here, you come with one set of values. When you leave, you'll be very different. And they all leave very different.
Well, 37 years ago, when you brought up the Internet and Larry King looked at you like you were slightly off in the head.
Yes, I understand that.
Well, of course, change is hard, right? But my point here is eventually the Internet did come to be. Eventually people did get rid of records and CDs.
Yes.
So, because necessity is the mother of invention. People saw a need for the Internet, and so it came to pass. So why is it then that everything that you've proposed would not happen eventually?
Well, we probably will kill each other first, because it takes time for society to grow. And we don't have that kind of time left. Many nations today are working on nuclear weapons, and many of them are guided by very ignorant people. Ignorant meaning not informed as to what shapes human values. They really don't know. They think some people are gifted, some are talented, some are lazy, some are hardworking. All that is BS, bad science. All people can be like Leonardo da Vinci. I'm going to try to convince you of that in the short time that I have left. I'm going to say that when my little boy came to me when he was about 3 years old, he said, "Daddy, the wheel came off my toy car." And I looked at it and he handed it to me. That means fix it. He handed it to me and I said, "The wheel surely did come off," and I threw it in the garbage. And I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He starts crying. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "You throwed it away." I thought, "I'll get your baby toys where the wheels don't come off." He said, "Well, maybe I can fix it." So I took it back and gave it to him, and he sat on the couch, and in 3 minutes he had the wheel back on. Then I picked him up and said, "That's wonderful. How did you do that?" He said, "I'm not that little. But if you can't, let Daddy do it. Let Mommy do it. You produce a blob." Do you understand what I'm saying?
We feel if we let the kids do it directly, we're not taking care of them.
Yes. No, you'd be surprised how bright children are. They ask all kinds of questions. "Daddy, what keeps the moon up there?" And then you go through a bunch of crap and you give them Mickey Mouse Club membership and you give them membership in fantastic things that have no reality at all. My kids ask good questions. What makes the continents drift apart? What makes the earth rotate? Kids ask great questions. Most people can't answer them. So they bring them up with Little Red Riding Hood and a bunch of crap. You fill their heads with nonsense. But if they tell you to always be honest with your kids. So when kids say, Daddy, where do babies come from? We say the stork brings them. Line number 1. And Santa Claus brings you all the gifts on Christmas. Line number 2. The Mickey Mouse Club, irrelevant to life. And all the other things we give our kids, what can you expect of that garbage? So I stepped out of school when I was 12 and a half years old. I couldn't stand it. I played hooky because I couldn't stand the indoctrination. I don't have the time to fill in all the bits, but when you come out here or get our book and tape, you will read it and it will change your value system. I get hundreds of letters from people that are about to kill themselves because they see no sense in life as it is, and they write back to me saying, you've given me a reason to live, a reason to want to grow and change, and my own values are undergoing modification.
How so?
Because I work on them, and I tell them why they have a low self-sufficiency, because they've been brought up in a home where there's no love to give, and if there's no love in the home, the children have no love to give. You have to know what love means. You have to know what certain words do to people. But if you tell a kid, you're stupid, you don't have the same grades your brothers have, or whatever you do, you hurt those kids. When you have 2 children and you pit one against the other, you produce jealousy and envy. That's where it comes from. When you say to one child, why can't you do your homework? Your brother always cleans up. I have to clean up after you. Why don't you clean up like your brother? You're producing jealousy and envy right there. They don't know how to raise children. They won't let a person touch a jet engine unless they go to school for years. Humans are much more complicated than any jet engine. You have to go to school to learn how to raise children if you want them to be smart. Hey, it isn't doing their homework that makes them smart.
Well, that also leads to something. In Brave New World, they made children in laboratories. How would the Venus Project work with that? We would
not have children's laboratories, but we would have in that laboratory a description of how everything we know of works. In nature, how we relate to nature. Then we tell them about language insufficiency. Then we teach them that there's no such thing as a criminal, that all governments are criminal in their behavior. The Democrats lie about the Republicans, the Republicans lie about the Democrats, that parents lie to children about Santa Claus and the Mickey Mouse Club and all the garbage that they give their kids. They have to be given a relevant value system, one that is related to the real world. You cannot design a city unless you do a study of what resources are available. In other words, what we do first is we ask, do we have the resources to house everyone on Earth, clothe everyone on Earth? Yes, we do have the resources. We have more than enough resources to take care of all human needs if used intelligently. We don't know how to manage resources. We waste resources. Look at your TV, your news. You'll see miles and miles of scrap material, wasted material. We design automobiles to wear out and break down. We design electric units to wear out and break down. There's no such thing as utopia. If I design the best city I know how to design, it would be a straitjacket to the kids of the future. They'll design their own cities. There are no utopias, no final frontiers, no best laptop you can design. You can design the best laptop with what you know up to now. But next year, they'll be lighter, smaller, faster, do more. There are no final frontiers, no utopias, no best airplane. It's a constant change, and man is due for a constant change.
We'll be back with Jacque Fresco. the final segment.
I wish you can come out here.
Sir, I'd love to come out there in January.
Oh, wonderful.
Jacque, many years ago, someone asked Chief Dan George, what is the meaning of life? And he answered, the meaning of life is to always get the money up front. Well, Chief Dan George was a pretty funny guy, but my theory is that great people will have a great answer to this question. Ergo, Jacque Fresco, what is the meaning of life?
Only what you give it, or what your society gives you to give it. Some young girl once asked me, why are you here? She wanted me to say, God put me here to help bring peace to the world. That's an ego trip. She said, why is she here? I said, because your father didn't use a condom.
Okay. Jacque, what are the steps needed to get us into this resource-based economy?
Well, the reason we want to make a major motion picture is because if I go around the world lecturing, I can only lecture to at most 300 people at a time. If we make a motion picture depicting the world of the future so they don't project their own values as a technical elitist telling people what to do or the way they ought to live, it's nothing like you imagine it. It's its emphasis is on what you call individuality. Its emphasis is on creativity in the arts and sciences. It is a non-uniform way of getting people to learn how to live together in peace and take advantage of the earth we live on for the benefit of all people.
Would we need to have a revolution? Would we need to take over the current government system and replace it with this system?
No, you don't have to do that, because all big industries are automating. And the more they automate, the less people they have. And the less people they have, the less purchasing power they have. And that's the end of the money system, when they automate to the extent that people cannot get jobs anymore. We're right there now. We're at that point now when societies are failing all over the world, not just America. It's failing all over the world, and none of them have any solutions.
So what is the plan?
You have to wait till people lose their home, lose their job, lose confidence in the people they elected, then they'll look for something else. You cannot shove society any faster than the march of events or biosocial pressures. Do you know what that means? It's biosocial pressures that change things.
Explain that, please.
Exposure to new ideas and new ways of thinking, and giving them tools with which they can examine any system whatsoever. One measure of intelligence is not an IQ test. It's the ability to extract significance from any situation.
He was asking what biosocial pressures mean.
Biosocial pressures means if it rained diamonds for 6 months, they would lose their value. That's a biosocial pressure.
Well, that's the law of supply and demand.
Well, that will change people. And their law, in other words, if 2/3 of the women died due to some strange disease, sexual relations would be revised.
Jacque, you have another 15 minutes on the show. I'd like you to use it to help awaken as many people as possible.
Okay. We would take soldiers are killing machines. They're taught to kill, to drop bombs on cities. And people become frightened of machines. They don't know that guided missiles are guided by people. It's people that drop bombs on cities. It's people that torture other people. It's people that shoot machine guns. Machines themselves will never take over. Hollywood scares people, and they say, well, the machines are getting so smart, they're going to take over. Let me tell you something. If you work your computer Saturday, Sunday, and you don't stop at all, it never says, hey, give me a day off, will you? I need a break too. Machines don't care. They don't feel. That's one thing we'll never be able to do, and that's give machines feelings. So machines will never say, gee, I'd like your job. I'd like to take over the human race. That's a human attribute. Now, let me put it another way. If you could make a machine with a rubber-like face that can show all the expressions of love, hate, revenge, but the machine will not feel. It's just like a motion picture. The actors really don't feel that emotion. They simulate it. And then most people, when they tell you, my brother was killed by a Mack truck, they say, I'm so sorry to hear that. They don't say, did you like your brother? Not at all. I hated the bastard. Then it's no loss to you. In other words, they don't even know how to talk to each other. I'm trying to say that the world you live in is as artificial as the values. And you cannot find solutions by inviting people on the air to talk about their values. Their values are part of their social indoctrination. I was never indoctrinated by the establishment. I don't have the time to go into all that detail now. You want to know what emotions are? They're racing your engine at a stoplight. That's what emotions are. Emotions in the future will be translated into an action, not a verbal hobby, like God bless everybody. Well, who the hell are you to tell God who to bless? The president says, God bless America. Well, who the hell is he to instruct God who to bless? It's so ridiculous. The whole story is a ridiculous story. And I cannot, in the short time that I have, turn people around. I don't have the time as yet.
Well, you say you want to make a movie. Do you feel then that a 2-hour movie can turn people around?
I'd rather make a series of films that would be much better than a 2-hour movie. But the 2-hour movie would have enough substance in them to give them a whole new way of looking at things. I turn people around here and in a very short time. I've turned a lot of people around. I've turned people around who are members of the Flat Earth Society. They believe the Earth is flat, so I joined that organization. It took me 2 hours to turn them around.
They were much easier than the KKK.
Oh, yes. Well, I wasn't that skilled in the old days. In the old days, I say, why are you beating up that Afro-American? He didn't hurt anybody. And what they said, hey, look, a nigger lover from the north. I made all the mistakes in the beginning. Do you understand? I didn't know how to approach them. I used reason and logic. Doesn't work at all. There's no such thing as logic unless a person is brought up to some scientific methods of evaluation. Semantics, people think, well, only if we clean up our language. You can't clean up your language unless you clean up the dominant values that are unrelated to our living systems.
Well, you see that now, political correctness. That's right out of Fahrenheit 451. And that's what it is. It's more laws, political correctness, suppression.
Doesn't work.
The Venus Project is the opposite of suppression, am I right?
Yes.
So what would life be like in a resource-based economy?
People would not envy other people because they have access to the same things other people have access to. There would be no jealousy in the Venus Project, in the new design of a culture. But the way people are brought up today, we manufacture jealousy, envy, hatred, distrust. All of that is shaped by culture. I know it's very hard to understand that because of the values you are given. There's no such thing as human nature. Human behavior, yes. Humans, if you're brought up in a home where, say, a young girl is brought up in a home, 17 years old, and daddy beats mommy 3 times a day, and he beats the daughter twice a day, She might grow up and say, boy, I'm never getting married. Where she comes from, that looks right. Do you understand? People behave in relation to the culture they're brought up in. When a Frenchman says, Vive la France, he never says, Vive la humanity. And that's distortion. The minute you do that, the minute you teach hatred of races, different races, you're just separating people. When a mother says to a little girl, you're a Lutheran, you don't go out with that little Catholic boy. They're making all these, adding to the problems. People have no idea, neither do psychiatrists or psychologists have any idea of how to change society, unfortunately.
You know, one thing I like about the current system with countries, with nationalism, is that you have somewhat of checks and balances. If one country gets out of line, another one comes in there and sorts them out. Okay, so
they don't really do that. If they did that, it'd be wonderful.
Yeah, but life isn't wonderful. Life is getting worse. If you ask the average person,
Yes, the universities are better equipped than ever. Every science lab has everything, and the wars are getting worse. The nerve gas, the poison gas, the destruction of nuclear weapons are increasing. So what good is all that? Where will it take us? We need another system. And if we ever get that motion picture out, I hope it can save a great many people, a great deal of misery and suffering.
Jacque, this is off topic a little for you, but do you believe that there is a new world order, that there is a cabal of people seeking to create a one world government and enslave it?
That one world government is a business world with them in charge. No, there's no one world government without some selfish group appointing themselves as the directors.
Today, would you say there is a one world, they're aiming for the one world government?
They want to control everything in the world.
But would not the resource-based economy and, would this not require a sort of a similar approach? It would need to be unified. Like we said, it would need to be holistic. It need to be globalized.
Today, there are millions of people in the world that know about the Venus Project. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but every country has groups in membership.
No, he was saying, wouldn't the resource-based economy, the Venus Project, be similar to a one-world government, where, because people have to be unified, would it be similar to the one-world government people are afraid of today?
No, not at all. It would not be like that. Do you remember when people used to operate elevators? They would turn a crank and they couldn't quite get to the floor. They had to adjust it. Today you press 25 and the elevator stops exactly there. In other words, machines will surpass the performance of people, and they will not take over, but they'll be assigned new tasks. For example, when I was a kid, a man would look out of an airplane and say, I'm about a mile high. With Doppler radar, it tells you exactly how high you are. No man can do that. Machines can handle trillions of bits of information per second. Humans are only capable of handling 7 different things at one time. Beyond that, their behavior becomes insufficient. Elitism will not grow, because elitism stops at a certain point. And what we have to do is ask whether or not we can surpass elitism. What is elitism? Elitism is few people with a certain amount of knowledge that's more relevant than others. In the future, computers will handle that. And they will make decisions that if you violate those decisions, it'll hurt you. They will advise you. I'd love to go into much detail. It's only when you come out here that I'll be able to do that.
Why did you change the name of socio-cyberneering to the Venus Project?
We found in Venus, a place where they didn't use insecticides on plants, they didn't spray poisons on the ground, and we started the project in Venus. Socio-cyberneering had no meaning to anyone. I had to tell them what it meant. And the Venus Project is the same way. It sounds more like what other people project into it. And the Venus Project, no one could remember socio-cyberneering, but they do remember the Venus Project.
So it was even before the word cyber came into existence and was so popular. Can get that off the air. So they didn't know what cyber meant. They didn't know. They couldn't remember the name or put it together or say it.
Well, to be honest with you, I have to consciously remind myself of what socio-cyberneering. I have to say it in my head before I say it out of my mouth.
When you get our book, after you read it twice, answer those questions.
I have to read it more than once. And is your book...
Excuse me, I just want to mention socio-cyberneering was engineering and cybernetics addressed to the social system. That's how that came about.
To the well-being of all the world's people, rather than a selected few. No elitism.
What's the difference between socio-cyberneering, which became the Venus Project, and technocracy, Howard Scott's technocracy? What's the difference?
Well, when I joined technocracy because I thought what I've heard was pretty good. But then I noticed there were no blacks in the organization. So I asked Howard Scott, how come there's no blacks? He said, let them start their own section. I said, how come there's no Orientals? He said, the Oriental mind can't grasp technology. So I said, you're wrong. And I resigned from the organization because it was for America only. It was not a global thing, and it would not work unless it's global.
Wow.
And I never saw any blueprints for the future. They claimed they had blueprints. I asked Howard Scott, how would you raise children? How would you prevent war? Well, he didn't. He said, we'll build a big army. We'll keep an army in America so that no one dare invade us. In other words, he was semi-normal at the time. And he wasn't broad enough, and nor technocracy was not broad enough to include everyone. And they didn't have enough information on the factors that shape human behavior.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that can scare people, is the concern that we enter into this resource-based economy model, which is similar in ways to technocracy. I think you're admitting that.
No, it has nothing in common with technocracy. People think a lot of people say it sounds like communism. Communism has banks, it has money, it has technical elitism, it has slums. It doesn't have any social design.
Well, I think people's concern is that after it's implemented, they find themselves in some Logan's Run or Island of Dr. Moreau scenario. And
I understand all that.
Yeah.
That's a normal person's view of what they think the future will be like. And it has nothing whatsoever in common with the Venus Project.
Jacque Fresco, you got 2 minutes. Convince the world in 2 minutes that the Venus Project is the only answer.
I can't do that. I can only say, if you inquire, get our books, our videos, our DVDs. That's the only way you'll learn about it. But if you come out here, you'll learn a great deal about it. It's not a tour of the Venus Project. It's really information which you never get in any school, to my knowledge.
Yeah, and let's be clear about it. You're not running a theme park in Venus, Florida.
No, not at all.
What's the website, Jacque?
TheVenusProject.com. www.thevenusproject.com.
And, of course, people can buy your book through your website or through Amazon. Also, there's a link on www.westcoasttruth.com to Jacque's book, The Best That Money Can't Buy. My guest has been Jacque Fresco. Jacque, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for the opportunity.